And we have Josephine with the Health Studies group, and I'll just pass it over to you. Thank you very much, Josephine, for sharing this with us.
Not at all. Part of my saying yesterday was because Catherine was very kind to say, oh, this is just going to be a conversation. So I want to start this out by saying this should be a conversation. I don't present myself as an expert in any way, shape, or form on concept mapping. I've used it in one course, a business management course, as you'll see, that is an online course. And so it has its limitations, what I'm going to be telling you, as a result of that sort of the online mode. Nevertheless, I'm going to sort of get into this now and sort of tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the next hour, which is just to review the concept mapping technique, how to create a concept map, and then look at some of the applications that I used it for in PHS 609, which is a course I teach, and then just give you a couple of other applications that it's been used for as well. I did actually get permission to do ethics clearance to do a small study. I wanted to see what kind of impact it had on the students' learning in the class, so I asked them a few questions at the end of the course, and I'll show you the results of that. And then just open it up for some general discussion on some of the other applications for concept mapping outside of teaching and learning. So this is all about visual representation, and just let me, great. So the concept map is actually a two-dimensional hierarchical node link diagram that visually will show your thoughts and the processes that go into those thoughts associated with knowledge. The most single important factor that influences learning is what the learner already knows, and concept mapping is a great technique of actually finding out what students know and integrating it into their learning and hopefully into their concepts of what they're learning from your course. This is derived from Azewell's theory of cognitive assimilation, and basically what it does is it says that meaningful learning is really important, particularly if it's situated in what people already know. And it says that people will construct their own learning. It's not what you feed to them. They actually create a sense of and a concept of what your knowledge is that you're giving them with respect to the knowledge that they already have. And this was really important for me because the course that I was teaching here was actually a graduate course. So I had students who came from straight from school. I also had students who had been and were experienced managers out in the field. So the concept mapping, I hoped, was going to give me a sense of what people already knew so that I could actually start to sort of rejig what I was teaching them on the fly. So the concept map has some very sort of confined structure to it. Generally what is really important, which sometimes gets missed out, is the fact that you need to have a focused question. And that's because if you think about your cognition, your knowledge, it's big. And so when you're trying to describe something, you have to bound it with this focused question, or else it just becomes very, very big when you try and ask them to tell you about what they already know. So generally what you do is you'll have a concept which generally is put in a box or an oval, and then you have these linking statements called propositions that help you to link each concept to each other. And there are a series of lines that link those concepts to each other. Now, as you can imagine, when you're starting to talk to students about their knowledge, they tend to become very linear in what they know, and most of us will complain that students don't really have the time or get given the time to be able to sit down and reflect on how all of those concepts are fit together. And some of us try and do that at the beginning of lessons by saying, you know, this is what we've learned, and here's where we're going, and here's how it fits together. But it's really helpful if the students can actually do that themselves as well. So the other thing that's really important to think about with concept maps is that they're best produced when they're hierarchical in nature. So where you go from the very general to the very specific. So when I show you, and I'm going to show you some concept maps that our students have done and that others have done, you'll see that you start with generally a much higher, sort of larger, broader concept, and you gradually get down through these other concepts and these propositions that link the concepts. You actually see that you'll get down to much more granular knowledge. And then ultimately, when you're building a concept map, to be able to bring it alive, to really illustrate what it is that you are talking about, it helps to have some examples as well. So just to review then, you have a concept which is some piece of knowledge. You'll have some linking nodes or some linking propositions that connect these nodes or concepts together. You want to have something that's hierarchical, going from the very general to the very specific, and then illustrate it with some examples. And if you can ask a focus question and use those characteristics, you'll tend to get a concept map, which is, for the most part, pretty clear. So there are some caveats. And that is that each concept map is obviously going to be a conceptualization of the students or of the person, whoever's creating it. So as a result, there's never any right answer. And as you can imagine, when you're using this within a course or you're using this to mark something, you can sort of extrapolate ahead and say, okay, so there are going to be some problems that will probably raise their ugly head as you move into the marketing of these things. So I actually use them as a learning tool, and I did use them as an evaluation tool. So that's the reason why this is called Brickbats and Bouquets. I want you to sort of see the good, the bad, and the ugly of these things. And they tend to relate back to the fact that there is no right answer. So as a result, they're time consuming. But what it does do is that it creates this wonderful sort of visual display of of a piece of knowledge. So what I'm going to do now is just show you, and this is going to be very, very small, so I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to be able to show you this, which is Novak's question, you know, what are concept maps? And as you can see, there are, just going to, we'll go through this a little more, but you'll start up here with concepts maps. What are they? And you've got a focus question, so what are concept maps, which is pretty big, but at least it's on just one, it's on one particular topic. You start up here with a very broad conceptualization, and you get more granular as you go down. Here are the propositions which connect thoughts. And the one thing that you'll see, and those who have done research in concept maps have found, is that the number of connecting arrows between nodes and between concepts is actually part of, usually represents a greater understanding of a topic. So if you have something that's very linear, where there are very few interconnections, it generally has been shown to provide sort of a concept map or an understanding which isn't quite as extensive as those students or folks who use concept maps that show that they understand the connections between all of these concepts. So in this particular case, you do actually have some cross-linking of concepts, and that's generally conceived to be a good thing and shows a greater understanding of how they're all connected to the whole. So here's another focus question. What are the functions of a cell membrane? And I like this one because it actually showed how it is possible to make this concept map very visual. And while it still achieves exactly the same as it did as the previous concept map, it does give a much more sort of immediate response when you're asking for, so what do you understand about this particular concept? And you'll see, while the students in my course didn't have a lot of time to create, it was a very busy course, they didn't have a lot of time to create their concept map. Some of them actually did bring in some other functionalities, which I'll show you. It didn't include including graphics, but it certainly included some other structural pieces that I'll get to. So one of the things that I wanted to be able to show you is that there are a number of different tools out there to help with concept mapping. And in this particular course, I used CMAP, which is a piece of free software that comes from and Mark, you can help me with it. It's IHC, IHMC, thank you.
Human-machine cognition.
Okay, whereabouts is that again?
Florida.
Florida, right, okay. So this can be accessed on the web, and I've put the URL there so that you can go in and actually have a look at it if you'd like. One of the things that I wanted to do, and I thought, well, I could do I could actually do a demonstration myself, or I could show you one which is done on the web. I actually give this link to my students when when I'm preparing them for the concept mapping exercise, and I don't know. Yep, I'm just gonna. So
Superheroes.
This guy is just talking about superheroes.
Concept. And once you click off of that, you can move the concept around. There are a couple of different ways to make what's called a proposition, which is two concepts linked together.
So this is actually the CMAP software.
Tools and really concept mapping practice is to put a word that links those two concepts together. So we'll just say that superheroes have particular motivations. And then if you want to move things around, you can simply just click on them and drag. Now, by default, there are no arrows, and I like there to be arrows. So one way that you can get the arrows is to click on the line, go up to Format and Styles, and then click on the Line tab, and experiment with the different choices under arrowheads. You can see here now the arrow's the direction that I want it. So we've got what's now called a proposition, two concepts linked together. Now let's map a little bit deeper. Let's explore the different motivations that superheroes might have. One is revenge. So let's look at the second way of creating a proposition and connecting concepts. So I can create a separate concept by double-clicking again. And let's make revenge its own concept, but we need to link these together. I'm going to go ahead and expand this window a little bit. Grab on the corner there. And we'll click back on motivation, and we'll drag this arrow down to this concept until we see that that concept is connected to it. And then again, it's looking for a linking word that we can enter here. And we could say perhaps that motivation includes revenge. And now we can go ahead and specify a couple of superheroes that perhaps were driven by revenge. One might be Batman, so I'm going to create another lowest level concept.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just going to shut that down. So that's the demonstration of the software. Just so you understand, it takes about probably about 10 minutes max to be able to get in there and get your hands dirty with the software. It's very, very intuitive, and there really isn't a lot to it. So that's the software that I actually had the students use. In my particular case, I also allowed them to use their own software if they wanted. Some of them chose to use PowerPoint and create just standard maps using PowerPoint. Some people used Word. Other people used mind mapping software, which is also free on the web. But for the most part, the students that I think did the best at the exercise were those who went in, familiarized themselves with the software, and again, I gave them a number of different resources, including the link to demonstrations like that. Those were the folks who actually probably did the best as a result, and it was because the software was pretty intuitive. So now I just want to get on to sort of how we actually can use the concept mapping software when it comes to teaching. And the learning process is clearly one where you should be able to use it. And in fact, I found that the engagement with this material really helped with some meaningful learning in my class. And the kind of maps that you can use, I actually chose myself in the class, by the way, to have the students conceive the map themselves. This class was a class of graduate students, and so I felt that with some instruction, which they were given, and some direction, that and a pretty clear focus question, that they would be able to go in and actually create the concept map themselves. So that was what I chose to do, to have them build it from scratch. Other folks have used it in a way where they'll actually build a concept. They'll actually have a map that has some labeled concepts, and then I'll have the students going in and either filling in the concept itself, or that might be missing, or filling in a proposition that might be missing, so one of those connecting statements. So they're actually looking to see, are they understanding what concept is missing in this particular hierarchy, and also whether or not they're able to conceive what kind of linkages are missing between the concepts. And then as well, some folks have used it where they actually will have a blank map so that you can actually see the focus question at the beginning. You might have a couple of starter concepts, and then the students are expected to fill in the blanks after that. And the reading that I did was actually a number of years ago now on this, but my sense from the reading, as I recall, was that the blank maps and the fill in the gaps tended to be with undergraduate courses that this was used. As well, one of the things that has also been written up and fairly successfully written up is the use of concept mapping for teaching and learning, where you're actually doing it in groups. And it's very popular with students if you do it in groups. In my particular class, I actually wanted to use it as a measure. I wanted to see how their learning changed from the start to the finish. So I had them doing it individually, and I asked them not to consult with each other when they were creating their maps, because I really wanted to get a sense of what they knew. And so I didn't use it that way. However, I think it has been used quite successfully, where students will actually, perhaps even in class, be given a concept map about a particular idea or an issue, and then they can discuss it in groups and sometimes fill in the blanks or create their own concept map. So it has been used quite successfully that way. In fact, I used it just individually. The one thing that this was an important piece for me was just reflection for the students. And so often in our classes, we don't give the students an opportunity to actually reflect on what they're learning, how they're actually connecting what they've known before with what they know now, nor do we oftentimes ask them to try and think conceptually about how all the pieces of our courses work together. So it was really important for me. I wanted to sort of get a sense of whether or not that was happening in the course. And the reflection piece was actually pretty important. And just anecdotally from the students, I heard that they really enjoyed the process of going back and actually thinking about what they'd learned in the course. The other usage is for curriculum development, research and instruction, and I'll go through those separately. So with curriculum development, I just wanted to show you this, which was, and again, I apologize profusely because we don't have a large screen, it sort of condenses everything. But I actually went through beforehand and took the course that I was teaching. It's a problem-based course, so primarily taught using cases. And I actually went through with each case, and I tried to map out the concepts that were coming out of each one of the cases, so that I could connect them into a whole and make sure that they connected back to my course objectives. So this was actually a very simple exercise to do, and it allowed me an opportunity to just go back in and go, okay, am I achieving what I think I'm going to achieve with these particular set of cases? The other thing that then it can be used for is for research, and I just wanted to show you a couple of things. And oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. The screen is really, really poor. But this is actually a research plan. I use this for and still continue to use it for my thesis. And I also wanted to sort of show you as well, and I know as well that there are other folks in the department now who are using them in this way. Suzanne Tice, I've got an example of an analytic plan that she asks all of her graduate students now to put together for her, and she gets them to use the concept mapping software. And as she said, it's an opportunity for us to have a discussion, and it's a discussion where I can visually see where they stand. And it allows me to sort of get a sense of what they're coming in with and where they are in the process. And so when I was submitting my ethics application, I actually submitted this as part of my ethics application so that they could see visually all of the pieces that I wanted to sequentially do in the research process. And just as an aside as well, I've actually used this in other external funding applications and gotten good feedback from it as well. And it's just because it's a really quick and sort of good visual overview for people who are looking at what you're proposing. Within the projects that we're doing with research as well, and I know this is really scary, we actually can use the concept mapping when we're looking at flows. And so this was actually a mapping of, if you can believe it, information flow in a regional health system. So being able to color the arrows, it's very, very noisy and dirty, but when you sit down with these, you can actually start to discuss pieces of your research projects which formally have sort of really been in your head. So this was a great way to start a discussion about the complexity of data flow between healthcare providers in a regional health system. And again, I think the capabilities of the program allowed me to sort of show better what was happening in the sort of chaotic approach within the system. This is one of Suzanne Tyus's graduate students' research plans. And again, it's just sort of an analytic plan to show you exactly what kind of research I'm going to do, what kind of approaches I'm going to take. Back to then finally instruction, and this is where I'm going to bring in a couple of smaller pieces just to give you a couple of anecdotes. This is from Dr. Jose Aroca from the department. He uses concept maps, perhaps not nominally, but he certainly uses them with his undergraduate courses. One of these is actually put up at the beginning of every single class, and he posts this on WebCT. And in essence, it shows the topic for the week or for the class, and then it shows each one of the pieces that he's covering in the class, and all of the sort of the granular details associated with it. And what I found, I actually TA'd for this course, and the reason why I was really impressed with this was because students don't use a lot of your teaching aids, but this was used uniformly by the students for review at the end of the semester. And it was because they were so impressed with it that I thought, gee, there's a great way to sort of bring everything together for students and that they can use for their teaching notes. And that's just another one from Dr. Aroca. And then finally is using it as an evaluation tool. And again, that's exactly what I did with this course. I wanted to be able to see, because Novak had expressed in his papers that they believed that it captured learning over time, I wanted to be able to sort of look at the temporal piece within the course and get a sense of, how did the students' learning improve, get worse, develop as over the course. And so that was one of the rationales for using it as I did. I also wanted to be able to look at it as far as a complement to replacing this final exam. And I took the final exam out of the course, and this was one of the components of the course structure. So this concept mapping exercise, as I'll get to in a moment, was worth 15% of the students' mark. The nice thing about this is that concept maps can give you both sort of a formative and a summative evaluation of the students. And so I used this formatively at the beginning of the course, and I used it as an evaluation tool at the end of the course to get a sort of a sum total of what is it that these students know now. And from the literature, it was suggested that this was a pretty good tool. So that's what I did. And just to then talk to you a little bit about the evaluation of these things, NOAC has always advocated for scored maps. And some people just will put this into a course and they won't mark it. In order to be able to sort of get a sense of how the students have done, they and others since then have said that you really need to go in and look at exactly what is being created. So they ascribe to a 1 mark for each valid link between concepts, 5 points for each valid hierarchy, 10 points for a valid cross point, and 1 point for each example. That's the kind of thing that they look at. So as you can imagine, if you're thinking about a concept map that you've given a student, going in and having to look at the concept maps in that kind of detail can involve quite a bit of time. And I can tell you that, in fact, it does take a lot of time to evaluate these. So if I'm looking for a brickbat for this particular technique, that would be one of them, is that it is relatively time-consuming if you're getting students to construct the maps from scratch, which I did. As I said before, there are other ways of doing this, fill in the blanks and other things which don't involve that same kind of time component. But I actually use this particular approach, scoring hierarchies, scoring concepts, scoring linkages, to be able to build this evaluation of their learning. Other people have actually have developed an evaluation map to start with, and they'll use that evaluation map to sort of tick off against what have students understood. And we've got this expert now, or the instructor might be the expert, or somebody from outside in the field might be an expert in this particular issue that you've written a focus question on. in this particular case, I wrote up I created my own concept map of what I was looking for from them, but I found it was essentially not particularly useful because these are constructed conceptualizations from the students. It was not me that was doing their concept map, and so it required a lot of flexibility from that particular point of view. That being said, one can look at a concept map and can see whether or not the key concepts that you've asked for are on the map. You just have to be a little flexible in how they're put together. Some people have also ascribed to some holistic methods. Basically, it's sort of they get a general sense of how they're putting this together kind of approach. But from the reading that I had done, no one's using that as the only kind of tool that they're to evaluate the concept maps for students. And for the most part, it looks like it's a bit of a blend, a hybrid mix between qualitative and quantitative. So this is, again, very small, but I wanted to show you this. I actually borrowed this, and it's based on, I think this is one that, Mark, had you put up on your site? I'm just trying to remember where I got this from. No, it wasn't. It was from Missouri. This was an evaluation grid. Sorry? From where? Sorry? From Missouri. And I can send you the link if you'd like, for sure. They had a kind of a neat and what seemed like a fairly comprehensive quantitative way of looking at concept maps that I hunted around to try and find some university somewhere that had an evaluation schema. And this one I thought was pretty good, and it was consistent with what Novak had originally said was appropriate for quantitative evaluation of maps. So I did provide the students with this beforehand so that they were aware of how they were going to be marked and how their grades were going to be assigned. And just, it actually didn't make a hill of beans difference when it came down to the maps. But I think it allowed me, when I was going back and explaining how I had actually marked them and what the students' mark was, I think it gave me, sort of a good fallback position. So, this was PHS 609. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the design of the course, and so that you can get a sense of how it actually rolls out on the ground. So this is a web-enabled case-based course, and it's 100% online. I had 38 graduate students in the class in 2009, and the approach to the course is actually looking at sort of management controls and how they are levers of control for behaviors and performance within an organization. This is a course which which brings together public health students, in the Masters in Public Health program here. So some of these students have had some experience in the field. Others haven't had any at all. They might have a bit of a health services or clinical background. And many of them hadn't had any exposure at all to management concepts. So what I actually did at the beginning of the class is, and I'm just going to see what I've got here. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about the course then. So at the beginning of the class, the students were told that they were going to be going through this concept mapping exercise, and they were given a number of different readings and a video from me on management controls and how they connect to the organization. And so they were giving some sort of background material, and they were going to sort of produce a base map at the beginning, and then I was going to have them complete another map at the end of the course to be able to see where the shift was from start to finish. And again, I wanted them to be able to sort of think about some of those meaningful links between the learning that they had before the course and what was actually going to be happening at the end. So the assignment was that they were going to use this as a learning and a reflective tool, and I was going to use it as an evaluative tool. Again, week 1, they created this concept map following a review and some seminal literature, and then week 12, at the end of the course, and this was presented as a capstone exercise that they were given a 2-week period to complete. They completed this. Just as an aside, they were advised as they went through to work on these concept maps and try and keep them up to date. So the idea was that after each module, and they are 2-week modules, they would sit down and actually review the concept map that they created at the beginning. I did not mark the first concept map. They kept it, they actually submitted it to me at the time. And some of them asked for some feedback on it, and the feedback that I gave them was extremely generic. It was more on sort of the structure itself, how to use C-maps, that kind of thing. I really didn't want to impact too heavily or sort of press my subjective understanding of the concept map and the focus question on them. And they weren't as happy about that. I think they would have liked more feedback about their maps, but nevertheless, I actually wanted to see what the learning was as opposed to what I was pressing on them. So I didn't give them any feedback on that first base map. And so the focus question they were given is, what are management controls and how do they impact an organization? Pretty broad. But nevertheless, it was intended to sort of focus their thoughts down a little bit. So the instructor's map that I had actually put together, goodness gracious, sorry again, I wish it was a bigger screen, but once again, it sort of talked a little bit about outcomes, about culture. So everything that I'd actually taken out of my course objectives and my teaching plan, I laid it out and I tried to connect the pieces through. Originally, I think I'd showed you, I actually created a map where I took all of the cases and I made sure that they connected to the course objectives. And in this case now, I took all of the key subject learnings and concepts that I wanted them to understand, and I connected them back to those course objectives. And as you can see, pretty much everything, because this is more of a strategy course, everything came back to this sort of hotspot strategy at the beginning. And the students, because of the way I taught the course, that was one of the key concepts that I wanted the students to get. And as you'll see, that was more and less at times successful. So that's what we started with. And then this is what we actually came up with. And again, I'm sorry, the detail of this is so tiny with this very small screen, and I should have mentioned that before we actually got into the room assignment. But as you can see, we have the hierarchy going on, but there aren't a lot of sort of concepts that are linked, cross-linked and cross-referenced. So in this particular case, the students hadn't really gotten all of the concepts that they were going to be learning, and I actually laid out the course for them beforehand so that they could see all of the subjects that we were going to be covering for in the course. But many of them didn't make it onto the map. And so that was a very modest assignment of a mark, and while they didn't see this 53% because I actually didn't mark these base maps for them, what I tried to do was to go back in and to create a mark at the beginning and then to map exactly the same at the end, and to assign an evaluation in exactly the same way that I did at the beginning with the base map. And as chaotic as this may seem in its smallness, this was actually a student who received an 80%, and as you can see, it does look a little chaotic, but when you sit down with the map and you actually follow it through, it's a very good conceptualization of the course and how all of the pieces of the course fitted together. Again, another base map, very, very small. This person had gone into C-maps and found that you could actually create, put colors in all of the concepts. So they tried to connect all of the concepts, there was a little legend that went with this to show what the colors meant. And this person then came up with this at the end, which, while it was quite conceptually different, it really didn't, because there weren't as many concepts that correlated with the course, and that I wanted to see in there, and because there weren't as many cross-references, it actually didn't do as well as the others. Here's another one, somebody who used PowerPoint to put together their little map, and again, this is what happened at the end of it. So you can see they look very, very different, and it's not as if you can sort of have a preconceived idea at the beginning that this is what a concept map looks like. The students really created that for themselves. This is actually the base map for a chap who stood first in the class. He was an excellent student, had a little bit of management experience, but had a very a very good linear brain, and so as a result he was able to sort of come up with these connections between all of the topics. One of the things that he also did, and I'm just going to use my arrow here perhaps to show you, he actually, with CMAPs, you can go in and for each of your concepts, you can actually connect them to other subcategories. So in this particular case, here is organizational strategy. That was that main hub that we wanted to see, and as you can see, he's got this, it is getting to be a bit of a hub with everything going through the strategy. He actually connected it down, and he had some other subcategories. You can actually connect submaps to maps. You can connect documents to your concepts. So the functionality that comes along with CMAPs is kind of neat, because with each one of those concept squares, you can go in and attach documents to it. So if you wanted to as an instructor, you could post the concept map and you can actually show the concept itself, and then you could have it connecting to a bunch of documents that you may want the students to read, or you could have it connecting to your course outline if you wanted them to see where it was coming in. So that's the course, and again, this was the evaluation grid. What actually happened was I ended up going in and tried to sort of put together a marking rubric that would make a little more sense. And so I marked them all out of 60, then moved it up to 100% of 15%, which was the total marks that were assigned in the course. And I must admit, many of the students sent me in a little written blurb, and I had said to them, if you want to give a short narrative about your concept map so it will help situate me in where you are, send it in. And there were some of them who did a really good job on that, so they were given a couple of extra bonus points if they did that. But that's actually how I laid it out when it came down to actually marking. And some of it was, some of it was literally counting the concepts that they had in there that matched my own, or that I thought that I hadn't thought of. And by the way, there were going to be concepts that you won't have thought of that the students will come up with. So I wanted to look at the concepts. I wanted to look at how connected they were. They had to be appropriately connected. It couldn't just be, a bunch of lines that weren't appropriate. I wanted to look at the links to make sure that the arrows were going in the right way, because clearly that makes a difference as well. And then just the basic layout. Did it make sense? So the basic layout and the understanding, for the most part, that was, well, actually the basic layout was that holistic approach that had been, or qualitative approach that had been advocated by some people in the literature. And I just wanted to put that piece in there. So, do I get a general sense that this person is getting it? The other thing that I did do that wasn't in the marking schema was that I wanted to look at cognitive progression. And this is going to seem a little bit like a gimme, but as I sat looking at the maps, there were some people who had really progressed from their base maps, and it wasn't showing up quantitatively when you started to look at nodes and links. And so what I did was I put in sort of this percentage, this relative percentage of 60% of understanding. How much how much had they progressively advanced over the period between their base and their final map. So here's the how did we do. I did this little research survey. At the end, I had 14 people return the survey. And it was really kind of interesting when I started to look at their responses. It was a 9-question survey, and I actually had them do it online. And I did get them to give me some information about their previous understanding of management controls, concept mapping, and case-based learning. And here's what we found out. Oh, by the way, I did just sort of look at, so what was the difference between the people who did participate and those who didn't? Because obviously those people who will participate in a survey oftentimes, or I've found, have tended to be students who are a little more engaged. And while there was a slight difference in the scores, the participants who filled out the survey were a little bit higher in the score. I didn't think it was really that significant. So as far as the student body goes, what was your knowledge of management controls part of the course? And as you can see, most of them had absolutely no experience in management controls or the concept of management controls. So it was a brand new subject area for them, which could have a little to do with the low level of understanding in the base maps and perhaps even in the final maps as well. And ditto with their experience with concept mapping. So this was really a greenfields exercise for them. So there was a big learning curve for the students as they went through. And that's certainly what I found from their comments as well. What was your knowledge of general management? As you can see here, this is what the course looks like. You've got a bunch of people who have some experience in management, some who are very, very experienced, and a whole pile of people who have absolutely no experience with management whatsoever. That to the point where they actually haven't taken any management courses in school. So again, you know, a very, very low level of understanding when they come into the course. I asked them about whether or not the instructions that they were given were sufficient, and I provided them, as I said before, with a full page of instructions. I actually had a page of WebCT devoted to the concept mapping exercise, and I provided them with a lot of online resources. I tried to direct them to some in particular because I knew that they were good, because I'd gone in beforehand and checked on them. And then did they use CMAP? For the most part, the students did, and that was certainly what I found from their results. So how did you approach the concept mapping exercise? Well, most of them didn't listen to the fact that we wanted them to do it as they went through. Most of them left it till the very end. And then I wanted them to rank their understanding of how the concept maps were evaluated. And as you can see, there was a whole bunch of people who said that they just understood a little bit about it, that many of them actually still felt that they were confused. Many of them said that they completely understood. So for the most part, I think the instructions about how they were going to be evaluated were pretty reasonable. And as again, I provided them with that framework at the beginning. I wanted them to tell me a little bit about how much they enjoyed the exercise, and as you'll see, nobody strongly agreed with the fact that they enjoyed it. Some of them did say they enjoyed it a little, and many of them really didn't enjoy the exercise at all. I asked them how it helped them organize and understand new subject material, and it was kind of interesting. You know, I started to see a glimmer of hope, because here a majority of the students were saying, well, actually it had helped them organize the material that they got within the class. However, when it came to sort of understanding the relationship between the material and the course, again, we saw that there was a strong relationship with that. Here I asked them, did CMAP help understand the relationships between new course material and prior knowledge? And as you'll see again, you know, we had a bunch of people who disagreed, but I was actually kind of pleased that I had a bunch of people who said, yeah, it really did help me to situate this within what I'd learned before. Here's my sort of pièce de résistance, and this is what I found anecdotally from all of the students as well. I asked them whether or not it had increased their critical thinking skills, and while I had a number of people who said that it didn't, I had a whole pile of people who said that it really helped with their critical thinking skills. And you know, I was quite pleased with that, because oftentimes when we get into the courses, particularly with online courses, the complaints that I get from students informally is that, you know, there's a lot of rote regurgitation, and I was really pleased to see that this course had helped them with that. Whether or not it was valuable to them, well, 50-50 on that one. Some of them agreed, others didn't. And then finally, did it actually provide me, as the instructor, with a good visual representation of the learning that they had? And this was really interesting. Most of them, or many of them, felt that it didn't. And I didn't have an opportunity to go back and speak with them, unfortunately, because by this time they were off campus. I had to do this as part of their evaluation of the course. While I did get a bunch of people who felt that, yeah, it was a pretty good idea of what I'd learned, there are a whole bunch of people who didn't feel that way. And I'd love to be able to have sort of, you know, closed the feedback loop to go back to them to find out, you know, what would have improved on that. And then finding whether or not it was a meaningful learning experience, and a large majority of the students felt that it was a good, meaningful learning experience. So the take home from this is, helps critical thinking skills, seems to be a meaningful learning experience, and they're not going to enjoy it while they're doing it. So this is totally unscientific, but I wanted to sort of show you that with my subjective marking of students' base maps from start to finish, there was sort of a 25% increase in the mark as they went from their base understanding to the end understanding. So clearly something was happening within the course. And I'm just going to put some comments up here from the students so that you can see them. I think there was some specific discussion about the CMAP exercise itself, but I also was really pleased to see that, that the students were at least prepared to write something in this evaluation at the end. And some of them, as I said, expressed some concern about the fact that they didn't get any feedback on the base map. And I think, you know, at a later date, or when I use this again, I would certainly provide the students with some feedback on that base map. Many people expressed the fact that it took them a while to sort of get over the what the heck is this kind of approach, that they were really amazed at the difference between their base and final maps, and some of them expressed some real sense of accomplishment in what they'd learned throughout the course. And some of them also then came back and said, well, you know, this would be much better if you'd actually done this throughout the course and you'd have revised it progressively. And there's things that I have thought about in the past that I've thought about since then, where I mean, clearly providing the students with some base feedback, actually bringing out their concept maps and giving them time in class or in a structured way to be able to work on the concept maps. And then I would probably not be as slavish with the students about keeping them separate from each other. I believe that some of that group learning probably would have been quite helpful for many of the students, particularly given that we are asking them to work in groups a lot related to this development of new knowledge. So in summary, the concept mapping has numerous applications for the teaching learning dyad, and in this particular case I had them build a map from scratch at the graduate level. It required a lot of introduction, orientation and feedback to be able to engage the students, and it really did involve some marking complexity and time. What I found was it did contribute to a pretty meaningful learning experience for the students. Many of them did say, though, that they at times felt lost. But once they got through that lost period, they felt very good about what they'd done. Concept maps are messy, and you need to be able to put together before, you need to anticipate that, and then have some systematic way of assessing the concept maps at the end. And then finally, just that there's no right map, as you saw, and so as a result, it can be quite time consuming. And that's it. So if you've got any discussion or questions that you want to ask, I'd be happy to answer them. Lisa?
Yeah, you mentioned that you would have them post them, or that you could connect them to, like,
yes.
And I'm just wondering how that works. Like, if they're handing them in, are they handing them in online into ACE? Like, do we have that capacity to link CMAP to ACE in some way? Like, how does that work?
In this particular case, what I did was I actually asked them to post to, and actually I won't spend the time doing it, but IHMC, thank you, actually has a portal. And so when you bring up CMAPs, and I'll just show you here.
The people that make the concept map.
I'm sorry, the concept mapping software, CMAP. Yeah. So they actually have a portal, and you can go in and create a folder on the portal for your course, and you can provide the students with the opportunity to go in and post their maps. When they do that, it's very easy to import the actual map, and you can navigate around their map in your own CMAPs tool. So it's a wonderful way to use it. But because at the beginning, I didn't want to penalize students who were not going to use CMAPs, because I didn't want to have the argument of, you know, this was too tough. I had to learn this new tool as well as this new, exactly. So I wanted to give them as much flexibility as I could at the beginning, and so
Figure out Twitter.
yeah, that's right. Well, that's true. So what I did was, you know, I could actually, in those cases, I provided them with I asked them if it was okay to provide them with their mark online and any feedback online. So I provided them with the feedback online.
So you can actually on the map provide
you can
feedback?
save it back in, yeah.
So like a comment tool on the map or something like that?
No, you could just go in and use, you know, just create another, you can actually just create a concept map that doesn't have a frame around it, so it looks like comments. So you can just go in and sort of make your comments directly on the map. Alternately, they can go in and create a JPEG, and then you can just come back and just put your notes directly on the JPEG. If they gave a Word document or a PowerPoint document, I actually had to go in and sort of save a little, sort of some notes on that as well. But it tended to interfere with it. The concept map was where they saved to the portal was actually best. But of course, because it's public, you need to ask those students for permission to, number one, you have to let them know it's going to be public, and then you have to ask permission to make sure that you can post them back.
So if it's, sorry if I'm not.
Yep, that's okay.
If it's on that portal, let's just say you I envision having a group working on one, so if
yes.
they posted it to the portal, could
yes.
you have 5 people working on it at once?
I don't think you can have it at once.
Not at once,
Oh,
but
at
let's
once.
say like,
Yeah.
I go in and put my stuff in at 8 o'clock, and then my friend puts some in at 9, and like they can
Oh,
all
y-
work
oh,
on it
absolutely.
simultaneously.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
that would be a neat way to, if you want to reduce
Yep.
the marking, is you could have them do it in groups and then
Yeah.
just post it, and they could all work on it. And that
For
saves
sure.
the complaint of, oh, we couldn't get together, or, the
Right.
find times to work together.
Yeah.
But I think they can do it simultaneously.
They can too, can they? Actually, I've never used that functionality. That's very cool.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
When you say it's public, so other students who weren't working on the same map could then see the comments that you wrote back and the mark?
Correct.
But you
You can-
share it with just certain people.
Yes, you can. You can limit the number of people that can actually share it. But I'm because we don't have administrator rights over the site. I didn't know enough about the site to feel entirely comfortable about it. So I went back to the students and made sure that they understood that it was not something that I owned. It was nothing that the university owned as well. So I think there's less.
Against university privacy.
Not the marks, but if they could
Even
share the
comments.
assignments and look at the.
But no, but the comments that go back.
And that's why you need
No.
permission from the student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yep.
didn't see that flying in an undergrad.
But if you had them working on it as a group,
Competitive.
and then they printed it as a JPEG and handed it in, you could mark it manually.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely.
Or email you the JPEG.
Yeah, I just found that the functionality is very good, and the CMAP tool is really intuitive. Do you use it now, Mark, or?
There's sort of three concept map tools that I
Do you use?
would recommend. CMAPS is one of them.
Okay.
I think it's really good in terms of its the learning incline or whatever is, you can be up to speed in 10 minutes or 15
Absolutely,
minutes.
yeah.
And it has the basic functionality that one needs, the collaboration that we were mentioning. I've never tried this, but I think it also has the ability that you can record the process of creating a CMAP and then have it play back. So if you wanted to see how students actually went about doing it, you could do that. You can also nest certain nodes.
And it's the nesting that I was talking about when I said you can create these sort of sub concepts. Yeah, so it's very powerful.
Another one is called Vue, V-U-E. You just do a search for visual understanding environment. And I think it's the one that interests me the most for the future, because CMAPS seems to keep tweaking itself, but it hasn't undergone any radical changes. But Vue is a concept map program, but it also has the facility kind of like Prezi, so that you can create pathways through it, and then you can play them.
Interesting.
So it becomes like a presentation
Yeah.
as well. And then another one is called MindMeister, which is kind of neat because you can create very, very complex maps, and then with the click of a button, you can hide entire branches of them.
Right.
So if you want to just focus on one branch, you can do that.
Interesting.
That was going to be my question. With this one, it gets very complicated. Does it have the ability to filter by color, for example? So
It does not.
Doesn't.
No.
Vue does.
Vue does,
Right.
not CMAPs. And
I
it's
want to see only the red branches because those mean something special.
Right.
compared to the green branches.
yeah.
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute because it's 1 o'clock, so if anyone has to leave, please do so. What I'll do, I just wanted to
Yes.
quickly thank Josephine.
Yeah, thanks.